Upon assumption, one of the focus of President Muhammadu Buhari is to fight corruption. Since then, he has set up the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption to advise government on steps and actions to be taken to check corruption. My guest talks about the work the committee has done on this week's edition of the program.
Hello there, thank you for joining me on the program this week. I'm Gloria Umezuke. Corruption has been described as the nation's greatest challenge as it's been blamed on poverty rates, reduced life expectancy, high mortality rate and the deterioration of standards of living. It's indeed the enemy of development and good governance. Well, my guest is the Executive Secretary of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption. But up ahead. The acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, wants financial institutions to be held responsible for illicit financial flow. Take a listen. Since the inception of the present administration, monies have been recovered in several locations. There have also been several arrests and trials for alleged fraud. These are actions by the government to fight corruption. This conference by the Ministry of Justice seeks to identify ways to combat illicit financial flows and enhance asset recovery to foster sustainable development.
To invite Professor Yemi Osinbajo, SAN.
The acting president, who is the special guest, did not hide his feelings on the activities of banks and other financial institutions on illicit financial flow.
When somebody loots the resources of a country and deprives millions of people of the means by which they would even make a decent existence, that is even more criminal. This cannot happen without a handshake, if you like, between the countries where they are transferred and the institutions and countries to which they are transferred, especially the financial institutions. So we must work at somehow delegitimizing those kinds of transactions and criminalizing them so that banks and financial institutions that are engaged in this are actually called out and they are made to face the consequences of engaging in criminal conduct. If that isn't done, then we're not likely to get very far. We are experiencing in Nigeria a situation where corruption fights back and fights back so persuasively, so eloquently sometimes, and with such resources that government itself, if government is not careful, it can be overwhelmed. There's a media war against the fight against corruption. You will find people who will put stories in the media that suggest that there is something wrong with fighting corruption.
A former vice chair of Transparency International, Mr. Akere Muna, said it was morally wrong for banks and financial institutions to keep stolen and frozen funds while lamenting the huge funds Africa loses from illicit financial flows.
A continent is losing anywhere from $50 to $80 billion annually in financial flows. More effort is needed in asset recovery and repatriation. Weak national and regional capacities impede efforts to curb illicit financial flows.
The chairman, Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, regretted that most of the financial assets stolen from Nigeria were usually transferred abroad and, in effect, deprive the nation of the capacity to realize sustainable development goals.
Nigeria has the largest number of uncompleted projects in this world. Many people just take the money and walk away in collusion with the ministry or agency that awarded the contract.
The conference is aimed at closing the knowledge gap on the nature and effect of annual cross-border flow of proceeds of criminal activities, mostly from developing and transitional economies to developed economies. In our interview, Professor Bolaji Owasonwoye speaks about the fight against corruption, asset recovery, and the government's whistleblowing policy.
Professor Bolaji Owasonwoye, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, let's talk about the hot topic right now, the illicit, flow of finances from Nigeria. Really, what is the magnitude of what we are discussing at the moment?
Well, it is believed that about 65 to 70% of capital outflows out of our country, especially out of Africa, in fact, is made up of illicit financial flows. The money is stolen by politically exposed persons, or what we call money that is criminally taken out, accounts for less than 30%. So we're looking at money that goes out through commercial transactions, over-invoicing, trade mispricing, under-invoicing, profit shifting, tax evasion, exploitation of regulatory loopholes. That's what we're looking at here. So the conversation really is about identifying this category of outflows and government taking measures to stop them, especially through appropriate taxing regimes, gathering of the right kind of information, and being able to know where and when to apply pressures on people who ought to pay more than they are paying at the moment.
You see, during the conference, the chairman mentioned a lot of things, including the 55 persons who have diverted about 1.3 something trillion of Nigeria's money under the Yar'Adua administration of Obasanjo and then Jonathan. And many other revelations which came to show how deep the problem really is. Would you say you have made any progress so far?
Yeah, that reference was to the sum total of what was being pursued by anti-corruption agencies from the hands of politically exposed persons, governors, private business people,
yes,
ministers who had occupied public office and their collaborators, and either during or after office had been charged to court. And the amount of money that government was trying to recover from the criminality perpetrated by these people amounted to about 1.something trillion. So that category would not necessarily qualify as illicit financial flow. That was criminal assets, what can I call it now? Criminal theft, of public assets, direct.
Which is still part of under your purview.
Of course, it's still under our purview. So I want to distinguish. And these were cases already also filed in court that were not making progress, and government could not really recover those assets to use them because of dilatory tactics and all manner of measures that delayed them. But of course, they still fall within our purview, and they are still part of assets that government is trying to recover.
When we talk about asset recovery, how much have we really recovered, so to speak, so far?
When we talk about asset recovery, I cannot give you exact figures, but you are looking at two types of recoveries that you are looking at. You are looking at recoveries that fall under final forfeiture orders, whereby the case has gone through the legal process, criminal justice process, the accused person has been found guilty.